I had recently led a crusade to dictate public morals. I was not known for my liberal views or my insistence on the independence of the judiciary. She was drawn to my metal file cabinets and my porcelain dinnerware. We both objected strongly to the widespread abuse of three-piece bistros. She had startling new scientific evidence that the papacy was involved. Together we saluted the cast iron stoves of our ancestors. And I stared at the zip.
Well, howdy, friends, neighbors, associates, adversaries of a sort, across town and across the globe. Here we are on a magnificent, in relative terms, May 29th in the year 2014. For those of you who are accessing this presentation on a disc or some other convenient form of media that you use to go through the archives, this is public access television. That means that people like yours truly, who has an absolutely unique perspective on what's going on about town and about the planet, has an opportunity to share with those of you who are interested all of the salacious, interesting, informative, and in some cases absolutely irrelevant things that are happening in this day and age, and especially in the current time frame, because we come back here on Public Affairs, Public Access regularly to bring you up to date on everything that's going down. So some of you know what to expect. If you are tuning in accidentally or for the first time because somebody told you the wild man is back in town, then understand that what you hear on this show is not going to be the same old stuff that you hear on either the big television networks or the cable news channels, if we want to give them a dignified title. But what we do all the time, and what we're going to do tonight, is to scatter right across the landscape and pick up some interesting facts that you may not have heard about, that are underneath, behind, or next to some of the stories that are more familiar to you. What's going on these days, in fact, for most of the last month, as many of you will agree, is brouhaha surrounding the ownership of the LA Clippers and some comments allegedly made by the owner of the LA Clippers and what's going to happen to that fine basketball team. Well, you know, the official story that you've heard is true in some respects, but let's just kind of, before I tell you some of the really interesting side stories here, let's review some of what did get reported to you, the general public, not the insider view, but you, those who starve for news and usually end up coming to me to find what the truth is. It was said that a girlfriend of one Donald Sterling took some pictures of her and Dick Cheney and Miley Cyrus at what apparently was some sort of a twerking lesson, and it was Miley Cyrus and Mr. Sterling's girlfriend who were being taught by Mr. Cheney, one of the great twerkers of our day. Some of you probably knew that already from, you know, the secret YouTube videos, The Secret Life of Dick Cheney. But if you haven't, anyway, it was also simultaneously and erroneously reported that Mr. Sterling's secretary, because sometimes she's a girlfriend and sometimes she's a secretary, she took pictures of the missing Malaysian jetliner and was going to put them on her Twitter account, or maybe did and then took them down because he didn't like being associated with a missing Malaysian aircraft during the NBA playoffs. And I don't think that's what really happened, but we'll come back to that Malaysian jetliner later. It was reported in some quarters that it was Mr. Sterling himself who had had his picture taken with an executive from the firm of Magic Johnson & Johnson. Now, I've been researching this. It turns out Magic Johnson & Johnson is a startup company that's going to be entering the genetically modified organism business. In other words, polluting our food, or modifying to detriment, if you prefer more polite construction. Anyway, involving themselves in our dietary futures. But for some reason, he didn't want it known that there were pictures taken that day and taken of him. Now, another story that came up same time was that his executive assistant, same person, just different titles, had taken a picture of Ted Nugent without a gun. And this caused a big stir, not only on Twitter and Facebook and God knows what all, but nobody could seem to find the picture, only references to the picture. And if you tuned in last time I was here, you know the kind of sorry things that are happening around the Ted Nugent religious cult, and so we think that has something to do with it. Anyway, another story. I mean, this was just profoundly adrift in extra, capitalized story events. Mr. Sterling's wife had apparently had a history of visiting an apartment complex they owned, pretending to be either a witch, I mean, during a time period which was not Halloween, designed to frighten some of the tenants, or dressed as a health inspector, trying to find out if people were using enough genetically modified food. And this confused many of the residents who, despite their impoverished status, were trying to eat normal food and choosing between food and rent. You've heard all of this before, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, saying all of that, before I get to this conclusion number one, we know that apparently there was some sort of recording made in which Mr. Sterling was screaming about polka music and that he didn't want anyone attending the Clippers basketball games. Well, needless to say, the NBA commissioner acted quickly and said this guy is a walking torpedo and he's just got to go. This is bad for business. He's I mean, things happened quickly after that, and when they did, Mr. Sterling compounded things by starting to say some of the weirdest things ever. I mean, by way of either apologizing or trying to explain himself, and these headlines that were coming out were strange. They did seem to confirm the twerking aspect of one of the stories, that somehow twerking was involved, and in a context that was going to be embarrassing to Mr. Sterling. But he seemed to be apologizing for things that people didn't understand, and then he seemed to be making all sorts of statements of retribution and apology. At the same time, he was saying that he wasn't going to budge, or that he was going to go look at some other places to take his team. One of them was off planet, I believe. After he said he'd move the team off planet, then he seemed to come down to earth, and he suggested that the LA Clippers were going to be moving to the National Football League, which really confused me. I don't understand how that would work, where a basketball team has 5 players. You understand that an NFL team, like all American football teams, has 11. But anyway, not to get too sidetracked here. Then apparently he threatened to sell off all the players and then sell the team, so that he would be effectively just selling a franchise without any actual operational body, so to speak, or bodies. But then it became very clear that there were recordings in the possession of this girlfriend, executive, whatever, who we will call by her proper presidential candidate name, Little Steviano Wonder. And apparently, I was able to get, and as usual, I can't tell you how, I got copies of some text messages between them, and it's very obvious that she had some goods on Mr. Sterling. She refers to recordings, and I investigated this a little bit further. I found out that even though Donald doesn't play any instrument well, he did try to do a lot of cover versions of Ramones tunes and early Beatles, but she didn't think they were very good. She was threatening to put them either on Pandora or Spotify or on YouTube or some such. But this was followed by Sterling's announcement that he was planning to change the name of his team while it was still something he hadn't sold yet. He was considering calling them the Flippers, or I think the Hubba Hubbas, I heard, or the Pork Bellies. None of this made very much sense, but since the NBA commissioner had said he has to sell the team, people started making offers, and apparently the 8th grade class at a local high school, a Catholic high school there in California, St. Cedric's, got some kind of bake sale together or something and raised $58, and so that was the first offer that anybody knew about, and that was quietly hush-hushed in all of the normal news channels. You probably didn't even find out about this. And I was suspicious about it just because in looking at the check, it appeared to have been signed by none other than Dick Cheney, which really confuses me. But that was not the only offer. Fox News apparently was interested in this Clippers franchise. Their director of acquisitions was talking to him. I was able to, once again, can't tell you how, but I got access to a very, very confidential email in which they tell Donald that they're interested. They actually give a price here, which I'm not going to give that away. But they say that they're interested in buying the team and changing the name. That maybe that's what caused him to be changing, you know, the name, at least as a suggestion. But they're saying that they're going to get some white guys to play. And what I was able to find out from some of my connections inside these networks, inside the cable TV industry, was that the Fox people thought that they would bring all the basketball players from the Clippers in to become the news department, you know, a new news department, you know, new personalities, and that they would send people like Sean Hannity out onto the court, and Bill O'Reilly too. He's a little short, but just to see what they were made of, and mostly, you know, kind of turn them into a California Globetrotters kind of novelty act. But anyway, they're in talks again now. They seriously have to sell this basketball team, and so I understand from some very highly placed sources that Monsanto is talking to them. In addition to some of the names you mentioned, they apparently would like, or they relish, not just would like, they relish the thought of creating some sort of genetically modified professional ball team. And if you understand that, then you've got even more irons in the fire than I do. I have, people say 17 or 18, 19, something like that. Anyway, that's enough about that story. I hope I've been able to add to what you already knew. Every night that I had to watch this, I just said, I'm gonna need another beer. And that brings me to another topic, because summer's coming, you know, and it's time for drinking beer. What time isn't? But I have a big complaint, ladies and gentlemen, and that is, you know, like any other beer drinker, I was delighted when people in America started doing craft beers. You know, we had small breweries creating things other than the insipid lager that we drank for years when I was growing up, you know, while mowing the lawn or watching baseball games or whatever. And so in the time since, I've probably sampled just about every craft beer that comes along. And in fact, I've been writing a book about it. You know, some of you old enough will remember a song by Cream, Strange Brew. Do you remember that? Well, it's pretty clever of me to title this new book I'm working on, Strange Brews, because I've been, as I say, I've tried most of them, and I think now we've got a trend going on where you don't have craft beer so much as you have novelty beer. I mean, if you have to have apples and cherries and vanilla and God knows what all in your beer, then I think you're getting a little confused about what it is you're drinking. And just as an example, I can tell you there are some things out there that I just wouldn't recommend to anybody. For example, one of those Oregon beers, Sewer Sensation. I was tempted one night at a pub, like, you know, I hadn't tried that, and I'll tell you right now, I'll never try it again. It has kind of a whiff of memorabilia trying to be refrigerated, if you get my drift. Another one you should stay away from, in my view, is First Confession. That is more like, it is more like motor oil than beer, but I understand that it works well in diesel engines. So if that's what you're buying it for, great. Baptist Climate, you know, it sounded like a hell of a good idea, or a God-fearing hell of a, anyway, yeah, very disappointing. I mean, after the first few sips, you forgot what you're supposed to be drinking. And certainly No Panties was one that, well, it appealed to me right away, but I couldn't even drink I couldn't drink the first one down all the way. But having said that, I did want to mention a few things in the line of craft beers that are worth looking into, just because they say something about the marketing of today's craft beers. One of those you may have tried lately, you're starting to see it in the stores, is Honest Mistake. Honest Mistake. And I like the honesty with which they present their product, even though they didn't spell check, you know, their advertising. I was at this beer tasting convention, and they passed this out, but they said it really was supposed to be better. So they're upfront apologizing for what's going to be a pretty disappointing experience for you. Here's another one I kind of did like, is Booze Monkey. If you've had Booze Monkey, that is a beer that encourages you to go bananas, really. And they say it's your money. Now that I don't get that unless what we're preaching is that, you know, you have money to burn no matter how rich or middle class you think you are, or even how poor you are. You actually have money to burn, and so you should monkey around with, I mean, you see what I'm saying? That sounded a little off target. I don't know what market they were going for. Another one, this one is really catching on in some quarters, is Master Plaster. I don't know if you can find it here. You may have to go out to the West Coast or the East Coast, but it'll get here eventually. And their slogan, don't waste waste, and get wasted. And I'm not sure when they were putting this ad together, if they meant to spell that W-A-I-S-T-E-D, get wasted, because I had a few of these and I put on 10 pounds, which is why I stopped drinking them, but it is guaranteed to go down eventually, and hopefully my weight will also eventually, you know, go down. Which brings me to, let me just cover one final topical beer, and that is called You'll Never Guess. You'll Never Guess. I can't even remember where I found You'll Never Guess, but they said that this is one you had to try. They don't even call it necessarily a beer or an ale. They just call it beverage, you know. They just call it beverage. And it says, who cares what's in it? Well, that made me wonder, because it also claims to be brewed with almost natural ingredients. Almost natural ingredients. What does that bring up for you? Well, for me, I had to think about that for a minute, because, you know, there are so many things that these days don't have natural ingredients, you know? And what am I talking about? I'm talking about adulterated food. Yes, adulterated food and beverages, and even adulterated, God knows what comes next, adulterated, spectator sports, like, for example, if we have the Monsanto Clippers, or I don't know what they'll call their stadium or their courthouse, their court, excuse me, not courthouse. I am trying to take them to court, but anyway, Monsanto is what came to my mind. Monsanto and genetically modified organizations. That's a little Freudian slip of the tongue. You know, they used to be pretty harmless. Monsanto did, but look, Vermont just passed a law. Yeah, and we're getting to it just a minute now. Vermont passed a law, the first workable food labeling, you know, GMO labeling law in these United States, and it's quite possible other states might get on the bandwagon, you know, eventually. Not Texas probably right away, but certainly some of the other states that have people really concerned with what they're eating, and I think as a result of this law passed in Vermont, that those who make genetically modified food, and about 90% of it, as you know, comes from Monsanto, they're kind of worried about how they're going to go about facing possible legislative decisions to require labeling. Now think about what you'd do if you're in their position. First thing you might try to do, sneak by a new labeling system that people won't look at very closely. And that would be this number one, this non-GMO label that actually says non-GMO, not. Non-GMO, not. I don't want to suggest that they're going to get away with something that crass, but they're going to try. Now, they may go another way. Once again, I have some, you might call them purloined documents, or purloined, or, well, you know, since we're talking about genetically modified, I don't know what kind of a loin it is, but anyway, they have a second label that they intend to put on food. And the way this works is, they say the product may not contain genetically modified organisms. And they don't put a but in here, they should, but the product may contain. In other words, they're technically being truthful, that it may not, but in the same sense on the label, it probably does, is the way the second part should read. So they're working with this label and seeing if they can smooth it out, you know, kind of fine-tune it, so they can start putting this on their products, and hopefully people will, you know, they won't be paying any attention. They won't much care, even if they are paying attention. Well, I don't think it works that way, but that's not all they've got in mind. Here's one that they actually are testing already. This product does not contain genetically modified organisms. Now, I've mentioned some swill that I drank that came from Oregon, and I just want to have you focus. See, most people are not going to pay a lot of attention to the fact that we're talking about organisms and not organisms, because an organism is just one of those cute things that people in Oregon say, you know? They're quips. Sort of, yeah, Canadian quips. None of them come to mind. I don't know the organisms as well as I should, but when I was drinking one of the Oregon, you know, craft beers, people were regaling me with many of these. So anyway, if you see a product with that label, remember they're not talking about organisms, they're talking about organisms. But you know, none of this is likely to work, and just because the law for labeling has already gone into effect in Vermont, others are not, you know, jumping on the bandwagon right away. So in the meantime, how do they want to approach this? These manufacturers of genetically modified food or other products that are on the shelves, how do they make it less obvious that that's what you're buying, okay, without doing anything about existing laws? Well, they are pretty clever. Here's another one I stole out of, I acquired from a boardroom without the knowledge of the people involved. It is a product that comes from a company called, allegedly, No Friend of Monsanto, registered mark. And this one in particular is for a macaroni preservative that kids allegedly love, you know. And the idea here is that if you see No Friend of Monsanto, you'll just automatically assume no GMOs in this thing. But you'd be wrong. So there you go. Anyway, people who make these kind of products are always trying to position themselves in the market and respond to difficult marketing challenges. And another example of who does this, the pharmaceutical industry. You know that. If you've seen some of my past programs, we've gone to town and we've gone to great lengths to talk about all of the hideous side effects that most of the modern medicine pharmacopoeia brings to aggrieved persons with irritations or diseases seeking some sort of relief. And the pharmaceutical companies who advertise very heavily, as you know, I mean, some nights you have to see, I mean, you see every other commercial for an entire hour, and sometimes 8 times an hour, blah, 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 for the latest pharmaceutical. And they realize now that in reading these long lists of possible side effects like, you know, cessation of breathing, degradation of heart function, trouble recognizing, you know, your brothers and sisters, difficulty balancing the inner ear with the outer ear, etc., shortness of breath, suicidal thoughts. These are not real handy to have in commercials. And so what they're trying to do is to make more palatable products. And I think what they're doing, because I'm going to come to this, they are making some slight changes apparently, but the first thing they've done is to look at the world where rock music dictates style, and they've realized that what they are naming some of these medicines or these treatments just doesn't do it for people when they could get a classy name. For example, I mean, who wants to be thinking about bimbotraxal nefertuna, you know, when they have a condition? Well, the biggest new thing you're going to see, and you haven't seen it yet, but mind you, you can keep your eye on the TV and you'll see these shortly, new names, in some cases for similar products or the same product or a repackaged version of the product, but new names that are classy and that are more comfortable for people who are taking them. For example, here's some of the names that I've dug up in a classified confidential briefing. Donut Circus, and I believe this is some sort of this is for stress management, I believe. Forsaken Baby Water, that's got a good ring to it. I think that's for high blood pressure. Mellow Boxcar, Mellow Boxcar. That is a humdinger, isn't it? I mean, I feel like I want to take Mellow Boxcar, and I don't even know what it's for. And incidentally, when they've created these, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when they create these new names, sometimes they create a new product, and sometimes they have to create a disease to go along with it, so they have something to treat. You know how that works. So in some cases, I mean, I'm not even sure what Mellow Boxcar is for, and they probably don't know either. Another one I really like, Surreal Bakery. I think a lot of women would like that one, and an egg-shaped shower. Egg-shaped shower. So, yeah, you know, something in general. Are you still taking the egg-shaped shower? Oh, yeah, it helps a lot, you know. Frolic Butler. That's going to be very popular among a younger set who have problems, attention deficit or whatever. Lurid Twilight. I wish I knew what that was for. Aimless Tugboat is I think maybe marketed already in Omaha, Nebraska, or was it Salt Lake City or Poughkeepsie, New York, one of those places. Did I mention Aimless Tugboat? Yes, and Bulldozer Party. Now, I want some of that. I don't care what that's for. You know, you see what I'm talking about, the appeal of these things. Or Easy Chocolate. That one's going to do a lot. Now, the other side of this is that in many cases, I don't know what they've done, there are still side effects, you know, for some of these products, but they're not nearly so bad, you know, as, you know, suicidal thoughts. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, once again, contents of a confidential memo, and I can't tell you how I got it. One of them advises that you should stop taking the product if there's a sudden urge to dominate your small community. Well, I have those urges all the time, and I'm not even sick, you know. Another one says, a possible side effect, occasional hideous swelling of the nose. Let me come back to that, because I think I know what that might be about. Another one says that if you live in or have visited a moose sanctuary recently, you should let your doctor know. Now, I always suspected something was going on in those moose sanctuaries. You have problems sleeping in cars, one of them advises, so don't take it if that happens, or if you have nightmares involving plumbers. So like I say, there's still side effects, but there's much better names, and the side effects seem a little less, you know, debilitating, okay? Let's call it that. So, progress on another front. That's what we're having, progress. You know, I do like talking about progress, and certainly there's a lot of progress going on. Lucky for us to be born at a time when there are strange brews and where there's genetically modified basketball and so forth. But that's not all. Did you hear just this week, I believe it was, that Google has demonstrated a car that drives itself? Now, I saw a little clip. I think it was on YouTube or something. A lot of the people that that took a ride in this new car that drives itself were mighty impressed, and I guess I would be too. For one thing, if you have a car that drives itself, then you can certainly text on your cell phone because you're not in charge. So that would take care of one big problem that we have these days straight on. Take it right off the market. No more problem with that. The other thing would be road rage, because if there were a bunch of cars driving themselves, then unlike humans, they probably have the sense to stay out of each other's way. And you can see this coming. You can see more and more automated things taking over human functions because, you know, there's more precision when we don't have, you know, all of those irritating human qualities going on. But if there's a car that can drive itself, I know a lot of you consumers like me, you wish you could find a car that would wash itself. You wouldn't have to go to the car wash, not if it takes care of it. And even better, I think, if you could find a car that makes its own car payments. Now that would be just about guaranteeing success. But because Google is out there, and well, another thing Google has that you're probably aware of is Google Glass, all right? Or if we want to use it in the plural, Google Glasses, and they're not widely available yet, but they are being tested, and some people, you know, some people are out there wearing their Google Glasses, which can take pictures or can show them their email or does everything a computer does except right up there at the top of your lens. And so it's going to make a splash eventually maybe, but remember there's a period where these new innovations of the sort, like a Google Glass, are definitely resisted. Most people don't like to see someone come up to them wearing Google Glass if they know what they're looking at and thinking they're being recorded all of the time. And we'll get to that sticky issue in a minute, because hardly a show goes by that I don't have to talk about what Facebook or the NSA is doing. But you understand what I'm saying. People don't like being recorded necessarily, and they don't like somebody who either shows off their snobbery or shows off their income by wearing these glasses that cost well over $1,000 now. But who knows, you know, the price of these things comes down as soon as you have that economy of scale. So maybe our kids will be getting something like a Google Glass or a competitor's product for, you know, nickels and dimes, if we still have such a thing as nickels and dimes in the future. But while Google is doing that, working with glass and working with the optical category, they're not the only ones out there testing new waters. In fact, I myself tried out a competitor's product. Microsoft is going to enter that market right now. I think I had a picture. Did I have a picture to show them? Yes. I recently tested the Microsoft Nose for News, and it probably looks pretty uncomfortable. I'll admit that. It doesn't look like it would be that useful to wear or that comfortable to wear in public, but I do have, or I did have when I was testing it. I'm a little tired now. The damn thing weighs quite a lot. It doesn't look like it, but I have two spectacular screens so that I can duplex. I can be looking at two different presentations at once, and it's interesting with the Nose for News. There were all sorts of stories around me that I became aware of before other people even knew there was a story. For some reason, I could just smell the adventure. A lot of times I would smell adventure. Sometimes I would just smell, you know, if I'd go to somebody's house, and I mean, I would smell the dog or... Well, what I'm saying is, it's not that selective. When you wear one of these Nose for News products, it's kind of like an overflow. It's a superabundance of information, and it's coming through a sense portal that you don't normally use. Now, some people ask me, yes, I was talking to some friends about this the other day, does it get in the way of eating? Sure it does. but you just, I mean, if you're going to keep it on and be attuned to the world's happenings while you're eating, you just have to work with different things. A lot of stuff that can be served with a straw will work pretty well here. If you, for example, have to sneeze, I will tell you that well, it presents problems. It presents problems. I was on an airplane just recently, and in the first place, the other passengers didn't like the fact that I was wearing the nose for news. And in the second place, there was a horrible smell on that plane. I never did figure out what it was. I mean, I could smell the jet fuel. And then I could also, so as we were passing over Diego Garcia, I could smell a Malaysian jetliner. I mean, boy, the thing about it is, when you get one of these nose for news devices, they don't have a manual yet. And so I was sort of like a test case, and I guess I ironed out some of their wrinkles, but God knows what they're going to do to make it work for a lot of other people. And I'll tell you this, if you're female, if you're of that gender, it probably doesn't look very attractive. I mean, for a cool guy like me, it just looked like I was, oh, what do you want to say, involved. But a lot of women would probably not want to do that. For one thing, you can barely see the lipstick, and for another thing, you tend to sweat heavily for reasons that were never explained to me. So I don't think women are going to like this. But that's not, like I say, competitors are out there, and so Google is testing the eyes for the glasses, and Microsoft is testing the nose. But I also tested a product from Apple, because certainly you would expect that Apple would get in on this. And Apple has a new earphone, and in particular the red head earphone. Now this one, since it fits in the ear, maybe it's a little more attractive. I mean, I even when I tested this one, I even took it out, you know, jogging, and I didn't have any problems with it falling out. Because actually what happens is, it's kind of a surgical procedure, so that might not appeal to you. They do have to solder it in there and connect it into one of the bones there, the heaviest bone of those tiny little bones in the inner ear. And once again, this product weighs more than it looks like. In fact, this thing weighs about 55 pounds. So the biggest problem I had with this device, was that for the first few days I was tipping over quite a lot. I mean, what can I say? I was tipping over. And I got used to it, though. I learned how to balance with this on. And anyway, here you can hear almost everything that's going on. And not just, I mean, before this whole thing with Donald Sterling even took off, I was hearing this screaming argument about the polka music and how we only play polka music at our NBA games. That's it. None of this rock and roll or this rap music. We are a polka, and I didn't even know who it was that was screaming. And then I heard those passengers on the Malaysian jetliner saying, "Oh, look, it's Diego Garcia, the top secret American base they leased from the British, and they must be taking us over here for a vacation." And I mean, I've heard so many things since I put that thing on my head. I probably shouldn't even mention some of them here, but that's why well, I'll tell you the truth. I heard people talking about what was in that damned, you know, that sewer surprise. I also heard people talking about what was in that you'll never guess it beverage. And I was appalled. I mean, I guess appalled is not the word, but it's pretty close to the word I would use. Anyway, what am I going to say? I tried the products, and I'm still here. I I guess I benefited in some way from being on the cutting edge, but the cutting edge these days, where technology is concerned, tends to be almost always about abuses of technology and abuses of what could be something progressive and something useful if properly used or used correctly or used by the right people. And once again, there's hardly one of these shows I do where I don't have to talk about what Facebook is up to or the National Security Agency, you name it. They're up to it again. So let me just get right to it, because yeah, that is next up on the agenda. Facebook. Let's take Facebook first. You may have heard this story, and if you haven't, you just check it out. Look it up on the web. And do excuse me there. They even put something weird in my so-called water. This is a new version of water produced by one of those not friendly with Monsanto companies, and boy, I should have known what would be in it. Anyway, Facebook wants to use your smartphone's microphone. Do you hear what I'm saying? SmartBook, well, let's call it that. SmartBook wants to use your microphone's face. Because what they want to do, and what they can do technologically, in case you didn't know, they can use your microphone that you're using to connect to Facebook and communicate with your social network. They can use that microphone to listen, okay? And so that's what they propose to do. They propose, if you don't object, they say, we'll just turn on that microphone, and so that means that, for example, when you're playing your stereo in the background, or your MP3 turned up real loud, or whatever, or listening to a band, they can hear the sound, and the modern technology, it can tell just what it is that you're listening to, and then if they decide that they want to do it, they can put it on your website, put it on your Facebook page. He's listening to the Moody Blues. He's listening to the Ramones. He's listening to REM. Or if there's a movie in the background and they are listening on your microphone, on your smartphone, they can say, he seems to like this new movie by Chet Huxley. Oh. But let's think about this for a minute. What is, and of course they're asking you if this is okay. So what if they can listen to everything that's being said in your house? Well, I just saw a post on my Facebook, and I'm going to share it with you, even though it's a pretty embarrassing post. Here, attributed to me, is a statement that the doctor says my hemorrhoids are a little better, but I'll probably never be able to play polo again. I got to tell you, it is true that I made this statement in the privacy of my own home, but I was actually rehearsing a part for a movie that I'm going to be in. And so I was just trying out the lines. I was just reading the script. Now, there are some other movies that I'm going to be in where I'm saying things that are even, well, I mean, I'd rather not have them on my Facebook page, but if my smart face or my face phone can be used to listen to everything I'm saying and then post it on my Facebook page, I'm a little bit upset. But the corporate version is no more disgusting than the National Security Agency version, the government version. Well, what is the NSA doing? I'll tell you what they've been doing. And you may have heard that Glenn Greenwald has a new book out about the NSA, lots of revelations. And one of them, if you haven't focused on this, then please do. Apparently, products manufactured by Cisco, who make, for example, a lot of the servers, the network devices that corporations use, were being intercepted by the National Security Agency. And then the National Security Agency put devices into these products that were being sent, for example, to law firms or corporations or you know what, for their internet services. And these devices then had sensitive hearing equipment in them. Isn't that strange? I'll tell you, I think we've got a shot up here, my coffee pot. This morning, I checked my coffee pot after I checked my microwave. Both of them had been tapped, you know. Both of them, I have to check this all the time. I mean, not just now and then, but practically every day. On the way over here, I checked in the car, in the dashboard of the car. I opened the glove compartment, and what do I see in my car? Well, once again, another listening device, and this looks like a camera device. So I'm not sure exactly why they wanted to put the listening or spying device in my microwave, but I think it's because it works better with some of the genetically modified food I was tempted to eat. I mean, it works sort of in concert, but they just never stop. Kill it. Kill it. Like I say, you're trying to do your TV show, and they just follow you wherever you go. And they, anyway, so you know about that. But President Obama, I think, is taking steps to solve our problem, or our problems, our being all of us that are being spied upon, because he has ordered that the NSA should start spying on itself. Now that's refreshing. But of course then we're going to have to appoint someone to spy on the people that are spying on the NSA to make sure that they're doing the right job of spying. But we'll get out of this eventually. Yes, we will. And that brings me to this question that is also on the minds of many right now, because there's legislation that's being talked about, and there's big corporate lobbies for net neutrality going away. And most of you, I'm sure you're sophisticated, you've read what this means. You know the implications of net neutrality going away. But here's the thing, and that means, you know, slower traffic, slower delivery time for those things that don't want to upfront some money to the big boys, those big service providers who happen to be the giant telecoms who administer all of your internet access. So unless you are out there on the pirate internet access community, you know, out there, landscape, then you're going to have to deal with it. But look how corporate America seems to be framing this challenge. It involves government versus private spying. If you agree to come up to their level and pay the right price, they'll guarantee you that nobody is spying on your internet communications. But if you don't, then you know that you're being spied on, because the NSA is reading all of your mail or watching all of your movies or listening to all your conversations about, you know, your hemorrhoids. Anyway, so enough about that. I mean, those are giant corporations, and we still have problems with real people. I mean, the guys walking around next to you, like in Texas. Take Texas, for example. Texas has lots of nice things and lots of pluses, also lots of negatives. Like, you know, the Open Carry Texas group or groups, they're going around with their weaponry and showing up. They have been showing up lately at mostly fast food restaurants, packing their ammo and guns. And one of the wonderful things that's happened in Texas, and I don't get to say this very often, is that some of these fast food restaurants decided, no way, you ain't coming in here with that stuff, and they simply said, no, you ain't being served. So you're probably going to see more signs like the one here that I made for you. There's one of the first, I just kind of borrowed it from a fast food restaurant that had gotten rid of them. You'll probably see a lot of this lately, and I think these guys, and girls too, must have been talking to Karl Rove lately, because apparently they have a new strategy. Because this seems to be backfiring, you know, going into fast food restaurants armed and ready to go, and it certainly wouldn't work very well if they went into a convenience store, would it? Those guys get robbed all the time. So Karl Rove apparently, and well, maybe it was Karl Rove, I have my insider information. He suggested that they start coming packed with all of their paraphernalia, showing up at churches, you know, to show that they're religious, and at museums, you know, to show that they have good taste and stuff like that. And maybe showing up at football games like that, you know. But we'll see what happens. At least they've had their initial public intimidation, arrogance crusade kind of retrofitted, blackballed. Let me talk about one other thing, because it's probably something that nobody has told you about. This, you know, spring break just passed. College students, as a general rule, you know what happens. You know, they go down to Florida and even places in Texas like Padre Island where there are beaches, and they booze it up with, you know, some of this, well, I've told you some of the things they're boozing it up with lately, and having this wild, impersonal, prolific sex adventure. But it turns out that many of today's college students are so devoted to their studies that they had a different kind of spring break. A lot of them went to some of the hotels across the country that are offering college credits for people who are reading, maybe they're out by the pool, you know, in a lounging chair and sipping on a brew, but they're reading during their spring break period, and so they get college credits at some popular hotels. And then other special hotel deals are out there that offer the kind of meditation experience, along with polka music, like Donald Sterling wanted to bring back to the NBA, polka music and camaraderie and no sex. You know, it's just completely off limits, so that the people can have an uplifting experience during the spring break. And dadgum, that you're probably just not hearing anything about that, are you? Because you assume that this spring break was just like the other spring breaks that happen every year. It wasn't like that, but nobody else told you before this show, right? I've got video, but I don't want to show it here because, I mean, I just took my nose for news off and it was too heavy. I was watching some of the video when I came in. I want to say one other thing before I go. You know, after these dawning rains the last few days, fleas are out of control in some of your neighborhoods, especially in the homes of those of you who have dogs. I just want to mention a few things before you start bombing your house with insecticides. You could consider vacuuming all of the air out of your house. Then these fleas wouldn't be able to breathe. Or you could get yourself some boa constrictors, because fleas are completely terrified at the sight of one of these. Or another natural thing you could do is to set your house on fire, because they just don't survive the intense heat that goes with a fire. Now, of course, all of these things might make your house unlivable, and you'd have to be out on the street. But if you're out on the street, I'll be out here with you, and I'll wave goodbye. So until next time, folks, have a good time.